The carnival's neon lights flickered weakly against the encroaching darkness, casting sickly hues across the cracked pavement. Elena's footsteps echoed hollowly as she made her way through the deserted fairground, her heart pounding in her chest. The air hung heavy with the scent of stale popcorn and something metallic, something she couldn't quite place. "Jacob," she called out, her voice trembling. "Where are you?" The Ferris wheel creaked ominously above her, its rusted carriages swaying in the breeze. Elena shuddered, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. This place had once been filled with laughter and joy, but now it felt like a graveyard of forgotten dreams. As I walked deeper into the carnival, memories flooded back, memories of happier times, of cotton candy and carousel rides. But those memories were tainted now, overshadowed by the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded me. Something was terribly wrong here, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Elena's heart leapt with relief. "Jacob, thank God you're here. This place is giving me the creeps." But as Jacob stepped into the dim light, Elena's relief turned to confusion. His eyes were glazed over, his movements stiff and unnatural. "Elena," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You're just in time for the show." Before Elena could react, strong hands grabbed her from behind. She screamed, struggling against her unseen assailant, but it was no use. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was Jacob's face, a cruel smile twisting his once friendly features. When Elena regained consciousness, she found herself strapped to a chair on a dimly lit stage. The musty velvet curtains framed her view of the audience, row upon row of empty seats stretching into the darkness. Panic clawed at her throat as she fought against her restraints. "Ladies and gentlemen," a booming voice echoed through the empty theater. "Prepare to be amazed by the greatest magical feat you've ever witnessed." The magician stepped into the spotlight, his top hat casting deep shadows across his gaunt face. His eyes glittered with malice as he approached Elena, twirling a wand between his long, spindly fingers. "My dear," he purred, his breath hot against her ear. "Are you ready to be part of the act?" Elena's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. She thought of her parents, who had warned her about coming to this abandoned carnival. She thought of Jacob, her childhood friend turned betrayer. How had it come to this? The magician's backstory unfolded in her mind. A once celebrated illusionist, driven to madness by his quest for the ultimate trick. Rumors whispered of dark rituals and forbidden knowledge, of volunteers who never returned from his shows. And now, Elena realized with horror, she was to be his next victim. "For my first trick," the magician announced to the empty theater, "I shall make this young lady disappear." He raised his wand, and Elena braced herself for whatever was to come. But instead of a magical flourish, the magician's hand darted out, gripping her arm with surprising strength. She felt a sharp pain and looked down to see blood welling up from a deep cut. "Oh, I'm sorry," the magician said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Did I say disappear? I meant dissect." Elena screamed as the magician produced a gleaming array of surgical instruments. The spotlight seemed to grow brighter, illuminating every terrifying detail of the scene. She could see the rust on the scalpels, the dried blood on the magician's cuffs. "Stop!" she cried out. "Please, someone help me!" But there was no one to hear her pleas. The empty seats stared back at her, silent witnesses to her torment. The magician leaned in close, his eyes wild with anticipation. "Now, my dear," he whispered, "let's see what makes you tick." I closed my eyes, bracing for the pain to come. But in that moment of darkness, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to be another victim, another broken body left to rot in this godforsaken carnival. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw my head forward, connecting with the magician's nose with a sickening crunch. He stumbled back, blood streaming down his face. I took advantage of his momentary distraction to work at my restraints, feeling the ropes begin to loosen. The magician recovered quickly, lunging at me with a snarl of rage. His fingers wrapped around my throat, squeezing tightly as spots danced before my eyes. With my last ounce of strength, I managed to free one hand. I groped blindly, my fingers closing around the handle of one of his surgical instruments. Without hesitation, I plunged it into his side. The magician's grip loosened as he howled in pain. I gasped for air, my vision clearing just in time to see him stumbling backwards. His heel caught on the edge of the stage, and for a moment, he teetered on the brink. Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of fear in his gaze. Then, with a final push, I sent him tumbling into the orchestra pit below. There was a sickening thud, followed by silence. Trembling, I freed myself from the remaining restraints and cautiously approached the edge of the stage. The sight that greeted me would be forever seared into my memory. The magician lay impaled on a broken piece of staging, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles. His eyes stared sightlessly upward, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. The pool of blood spreading beneath him glistened in the dim light. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat, but my ordeal wasn't over yet. A slow clapping sound echoed through the theater, and I spun around to see figures emerging from the shadows. The audience seats were no longer empty. They were filled with grotesque, misshapen forms, the magician's previous victims, I realized with horror. Their faces were masks of agony and ecstasy, twisted by whatever dark magic had kept them here. At the center of it all stood Jacob, his eyes now clear and filled with a sadistic glee. "Bravo, Elena," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You've passed the first test, but the show's not over yet." As the mutilated audience closed in around me, I realized the true horror of my situation. The magician had been just the beginning. The real nightmare was only just starting. My fingers closed around a lever, and without thinking, I pulled it with all my might. There was a groaning of ancient machinery, and suddenly the stage beneath my feet began to move. I clung to the curtain as the entire platform started to rise, revealing a cavernous space below. The creatures shrieked in anger and confusion, some of them losing their balance and tumbling into the pit. As the stage continued to ascend, I caught glimpses of the horrors hidden beneath the carnival. Cages filled with twisted experiments, tables laden with arcane instruments, and walls covered in symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. The platform shuddered to a halt at the very top of the carnival's big top. I found myself on a narrow catwalk, the ground dizzyingly far below. The wind whipped around me, carrying the sounds of the enraged creatures climbing up after me. I looked out over the carnival, seeing it for what it truly was. A place of unimaginable suffering, where countless souls had been trapped and tormented. And now, I was the only one who could end it. My eyes fell on the control panel for the carnival's electrical system. It was old and rusted, but still functional. I knew what I had to do. As the first of the creatures reached the catwalk, I made my choice. With a silent prayer, I threw the main switch. The carnival erupted in a blaze of light and sound. Every ride, every game, every light bulb suddenly flared to life. The sudden surge of power was too much for the ancient wiring to handle. Explosions rocked the big top as transformers overloaded. Fire spread rapidly, engulfing everything in its path. The creatures screamed, not in anger now, but in fear and pain. I watched as the carnival burned, feeling a mix of horror and relief. The heat was intense, the smoke thick and choking, but I couldn't look away. I owed it to all those who had suffered here to bear witness to its destruction. As the flames reached the catwalk, I closed my eyes, ready to accept whatever fate had in store for me. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A section of the burning roof collapsed, crashing through the catwalk. I felt myself falling, the heat of the flames giving way to the cool night air. then, darkness. I awoke to the sound of sirens and the acrid smell of smoke. Paramedics were leaning over me, their voices muffled and distant. As they lifted me onto a stretcher, I caught a glimpse of the carnival, or what was left of it. The once grand big top was now a smoldering ruin, wisps of smoke still rising from the blackened wreckage. As the ambulance doors closed, I saw police cars and fire trucks surrounding the area, their lights casting eerie shadows in the pre-dawn gloom. I wanted to tell them, to warn them about what had really happened here. But as I opened my mouth to speak, I realized the futility of it. Who would believe such a horrific tale? As the ambulance pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the carnival through the rear windows. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing amidst the ruins, tall, with a top hat silhouetted against the fading flames. But then we turned a corner, and the vision was gone. I sank back onto the stretcher, my body aching and my mind reeling from the night's events. The carnival was gone, its horrors seemingly put to rest. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. In the depths of my consciousness, I heard the faint echo of the magician's voice. The show must go on. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that somewhere out there, in some other abandoned lot or forgotten field, a new carnival was already taking shape, waiting for its next unwitting audience, waiting for someone like me. The ambulance sped on through the night, carrying me away from the physical remnants of my ordeal. But the real scars, the ones etched deep into my psyche, would never truly heal. I had survived the carnival's dark magic, but at what cost? As consciousness slipped away, my last thought was a silent promise to never forget and to always be vigilant. For in this world of shadows and illusions, the next magic trick might be lurking just around the corner, waiting to ensnare another innocent soul in its terrifying spectacle.